Hello everyone, my name is Stuart and welcome once again to another build guide video. Today we're going to be building the U Caliburn, U Series Caliburn, the U Channel Caliburn, whatever you want to call it. It's a design by Captain Slug, the tried and true. Really great design, lots of good things to be said about this blaster. Very sturdy, very rigid, and overall it can be a very powerful and reliable blaster. I'll talk more about the details later. This build guide will help with building a U Talon Claw, if that's what you're building. It, however, is not going to apply to every nitty-gritty detail of the U Talon Claw, although it will be very helpful. They're very comparable in their assembly. I've been building blasters here at Frontline Foam for over 2 years now, so I want my experience to be helpful, but I also don't want you to think that my advice is the end-all advice. I'm not the end-all expert on this, so please, if there's anything you feel is best for the build that you're doing, do so. I'm just here to help. What you see in front of you is not the entire everything we're going to need. We've got the printed parts, and we've got some of the hardware, but not all of it. It would be kind of hard to fit it all into frame. And what you're also seeing here is a number of upgrades. This is not going to be a default U Caliburn. It's going to be quite heavily upgraded. So if you get yours and it looks a little different, don't be worried. It's sometimes just a difference in upgrades. Another immediate thing you may notice is that our U channel here is black. Normally it looks like this, just fresh aluminum surface. And we've been experimenting with powder coating, a type of painting, lately, and this is among one of the first things we've powder coated, so we're still kind of testing things out, but powder coating is likely to be an option available on the website very soon. I'm going to try to refrain from talking about upgrades too much as we go. I'm just going to focus on just showing you how to build it, but at the end, I'm going to go over the entire blaster, front to back, to talk about the upgrades and my personal recommendations, as well as overall good choices to be made with the Caliburn according to your taste, if you're looking for high power or versatility, etc. Another note is here at Frontline Foam, we're constantly trying to optimize. We make lots of blasters and we make lots of different types of blasters with many different customization options. As a result, we're trying to make things better as we go. And sometimes we change things. So, for example, here on the U Caliburn, our railgasm actually differs slightly from the original railgasm that would come with an original U Caliburn. I believe ours ends up being slightly longer, and I can't cite the exact reason, but it's something along the lines of making our hardware more compatible with the U Talon Claw. So we have less duplicates of different parts, more things are cross-compatible. Additionally, there's a slight difference in the rear stock tube here, just little things like that are really there to help us be more efficient with our assembly and production. So don't be alarmed if you're building a kit from Captain Slug and it looks a little different, or if you printed your own stuff. Just make sure that you watch for any differences that there might be. If you get a kit from us, however, it's all going to agree with each other. It's when you mix and match that you might run into a little bit of a hiccup. But those are the two things that come to mind right now that would actually be of decent concern. As for tools when you're building this, you don't need anything crazy. In fact, most of it can be assembled with just a screwdriver. I'm pretty sure about that, but I'll probably find something along the way where I need something special. But right, so let's get started. What I like to do is I like to take individual sections of the blaster and assemble those first, and then put it all together in one big piece. Today I'm going to be using this drill here. I've got it set to the first torque setting, so it's not likely to strip out the PLA. Just be aware if you are using a drill as well. Be careful not to strip the screws, as the plastic is soft and can strip quite easily. But yeah, let's get started with the handle here. Here is one of our aluminum sears. This is a sear standoff, or the threaded standoff, something like that. That's going to fit in to this handle here in the back through this hole. I'm going to take my spring, hook it over this screw here, or if it's plastic, it's going to be a peg. Now, I've got all this held together in my hands. I'm going to slide this down into this groove and let the spring come down into this little triangle cutout. Then what you can do is you can see this peg right here. the spring is going to hook around that peg. So I just reached my finger in there and gently pushed it onto the peg. And now that it's hooked on the peg, I can fold this down and line it up there. Now, I take a screw for either side and just thread those into that standoff. So this should move pretty freely and of course should be spring loaded and snap back to position. Very good. Next, let's do the trigger. This is an aluminum trigger. By default, it's plastic. I like to grab it like so and push down with my palm to push that arm up and then feed this inside. And this piece of the trigger will fit under this piece of the sear. Just like that, and I let it come down. And then there's a little hole right here. Yeah, sorry, black parts almost every time. But what I can do is I can look through this hole and I can line up the hole in the trigger with that hole through the plastic. I'm going to take my pin and gently push it in and make sure it goes through and into the trigger. That serves as the pivot joint or the fulcrum for that. So now if I pull the trigger, the sear will drop down. Now do be careful, because if I relieve tension, my pin will fall out. This version of the Caliburn does not have screws on either side holding in that pin. So when we go to install it later, we're going to make sure that that pin is still there. It does like to fall out. Now I'm going to take my trigger guard, slide it into this square hole right here, and then push it flush up against the back. And as you can see, it's got little cutouts for these screws once again. We'll just tighten that down. Very nice. We actually didn't lose our pin in that maneuvering there. Now we've got our grip insert. The grip insert simply fits into the handle like so, makes it nice and flush. Without it, it can be a little bit of a different feel, but it's not too bad. I personally really like the grip insert. To install the grip insert, we just take one of these large nuts, fit it into that slot, and we take this big screw here, feed it in through the back, and then tighten that down. Very nice. So that is our handle all done. So we'll set this aside. Now let's work on the rear half of the mag well. What you see here may vary from what you have. They do come in different varieties. For example, this is the P-cap, aluminum P-cap upgrade. Don't ask me why it's called that. I know it's aluminum, but the P-cap is a little weird. This basically turns it into 3 parts so that this can fit together. This piece absorbs the shock from the piston, from the plunger, and just helps strengthen it overall and kind of becomes one piece. We're going to build this one, but by default, you have this one piece. So instead of, the 3, it's just this one solid piece. This is also, quite sturdy. It requires a little bit less assembly. Additionally, we're building a Talon Katana variant of the U Caliburn, meaning it's going to be compatible with Talon and Katana mags. If you'd like to build one that uses Elite, there are also variants of that have just room for the one mag release. So that way it's compatible with Elite mags. So to do this, there are a number of things we need to consider. Firstly, before I put anything too far together, notice these 2 holes in this groove. I'm going to place 2 screws in those holes to serve as pegs for our mag release springs. So just to be safe, sometimes when you put these screws in, they kind of come up against the wall, so you can't actually get the eyelet of the spring around it. So I'm actually going to bring the screws out a little bit, put the springs around them, and then put the screws back in, just so the springs can go on easier. So we've got those 2 guys in there. While we're here, let's do something that's quite central to the U-channel design, and that is these hex standoffs. So to attach all these parts to those big bars that you saw earlier, these standoffs fit in little hexagonal inserts deep inside the piece. I'll show you on the orange here. so it's easier to see. They have these cutouts that are hexagonally shaped, and those inserts fit inside. And then from the other side, you can fit a screw, and it taps and feeds and strengthens or holds very nicely. But as you notice, it kind of falls out. So what a neat incorporation in the design is, and a very good thought on the designer's part, is that I can put a screw through the back here, and that actually holds it in there so it can no longer fall out and it stays in place. So let's see if I can get the light in there. Yeah, so the hex is in its groove, and that 440 screw impedes it from coming out of its slot anymore. And the same thing goes for the other side. So lots of parts do this, and we'll be doing this several times. But yeah, it's helpful to do this ahead of time, because when the blaster's coming together, it can be very hard to get these in later, or if not impossible. Good. And this front piece, so we've got the whole mag weld. The front one we can access later, so I actually don't bother putting them in yet, because we can reach our finger into the mag weld to hold them in. So I'm not going to do that one. Now, our P-cap is going to sit here, and we've got two mag releases. Notice one is much longer than the other, so what we need to do is make sure that our P-cap is not reversed, because if it's like so, our mag release is going to hit. That's why there's that interesting shape there, so that way the mag releases have room to move properly. So it all fits together like so. I'm going to put a hex nut back here, just like that. A little bit of a tight fit, so I need to make sure that it all threads straight. Maybe pop it out and then thread it back. All right, so I put one of these longer bolts straight through the top here. And then I can tighten this down, making sure that that hex is lined up. There we go. And that kind of makes it one piece again. Very nice. Now, I'll take these two mag releases, and these fit over one with another. These pegs point outwards, and it fits into this slot. And then, as you've probably guessed, we're going to take a pin, and a pin is going to go through this hole right there, and through both of these, and then into the other hole on the other side. We won't have any screws securing it at this moment, but later there will be screws that hold it in. So I'm just making sure everything lines up, not forcing it too much. Whoops. And then just make sure that it passes through properly. As you can see, I can kind of rotate it like this, and that's because the pin made it through this section, this mag release, and this one, but never made it into this one. So I'm just going to give it a push further to make sure it bridges all three, and now it's got much less of that, and I can see that it's in both of them. Now, I'm kind of maintaining negative pressure on these to keep that pin in place. And now I'm going to put these springs onto these pegs. Maybe the pin will fall out. We'll probably have to do it again. That's all right, though. So those are our mag releases. We were able to get the pin through, and then the springs hooked top to bottom. Let's get this guy corrected. There we go. So there's that piece. Now we're going to take this guy, and this is really simple. We're just going to put in our hex inserts, standoff thingies, into those slots. And then as you can tell, we've got another slot here where we can put one of these screws, just like that. And then feed it all the way through, all the way in. So now that piece stays exactly where it needs to. Let's do the other side. All right, next one. Okay, so there's a lot going on here, but it's not too complex. What we need to do is we need to install our hex standoffs, 4 of them total, on this piece and this piece here. And this guy is going to be sandwiched in between. And then we'll have a total of 3 bolts binding them all together. So let's start with these. Just going to slide my hex nut in, and just like the other pieces you saw, I'm going to bring in a bolt. Some of them don't actually cross over the bolt. Some of them will actually just squeeze onto the bolt to hold it in place, so don't fret if it doesn't cross over it nice and clean. And then same thing here. Going to put a bolt or a hex thing in here, make sure it falls into its slot, and then put a bolt in through the back. So let's do those 4. Okay, so those have locked in those hex inserts perfectly, both front and back here. Now let's just slide it all together. This one just fits nicely over this one, and vice versa. This fits right on the back. We're going to feed a bolt through here, and as you can see, we're going to put a nut there. So that took a couple ins and outs. I just had to make sure I didn't cross thread the bolt. We'll do another one at the bottom. One fits in this nice little spot right there, and then we feed a bolt in through the back, and same thing. Since these bolts are so big, they can actually be quite snug. Don't need to worry too much about damaging anything. Now this one can be a little tricky. We need to, notice how this is a hexagonal shape? We need to put one of these nuts straight in there and make sure that it lands flat on the bottom. Right now mine is vertical, so you kind of got to play with it to get it in just the right orientation, and then you got to feed up another bolt through the back. I think there was some filament in the way, so I got to kind of help it, and then get that threaded in. It'll be very obvious if it catches properly. Hey, look at that, you can actually see it. But yeah, there we are. This is the butt of the blaster, all ready to go. Something that is helpful to check while you're here, especially if you have carbon fiber wrap, make sure that your U-channel actually slides into this. Sometimes you need to do a little bit of filing to make sure it can squeeze in properly, but ours is fitting very nicely, nice and smooth. Okay, let's assemble the foregrip assembly. This is the shuttle. It serves as the pump action, and this is an angled foregrip. I highly recommend it personally. This just simply slides on to this rail on the bottom, and judging by the silhouette of this piece, we want to match to the silhouette here. And as soon as those are lined up, this is really easy. We just pop this guy in. Wow, that was smooth. Sometimes it can be kind of tight. But put it in evenly on either side such that we see the hole right there. And then we take one of these little stubby screws and we put that there to hold it in. Okay, so that's assembled. Another option for these foregrips, if you don't have a grip insert, you can also feed a bolt through here and put a nut on the other end. That makes it just as secure. We like these little grip inserts. Another thing, make sure that this wall portion is at the front because the bars need to be able to come out the back. And you know what, in fact, while we're here, let's install our priming bars. They simply fit into these slots. We line up those holes, and we use those same stubby screws and tighten down the bars. Really simple. Okay, so we got our priming bars on, just 4 bolts, piece of cake. If your bars aren't nice and parallel, something's probably gone wrong, and you want to make sure that these bolts are nice and tight. They shouldn't be able to wiggle much. Of course, they can go like this, but as for the up and down, they should be nice and straight and parallel. So there's that. All right, so now let's actually start putting things together. I've got my U-channel here. I'm sorry, I can't fit everything in frame. I mean, this is like 25 inches long. I don't know. But these 2 holes, there's 2 holes on one end very close together. And then on the other end, there's just a lonely hole. This is the front, and this double hole is going to be the back. So the back is to my right currently. I'm going to flip it over, and then as you can see, we've got 2 holes here. Those 2 holes are going to agree with those two holes right there. So just set that into place, kind of flip it over, line it up, And if you remember, we didn't put a hex standoff there, but we did put one here. So we can totally just put a screw in there right now and tighten that down. Awesome. And while we're here, why not, like I said earlier, let's put in another hex nut in that slot in there. And this one we can reach easily with our finger, which is why I didn't bother doing it earlier. Just make sure it sits all the way at the bottom, or at least close to it. And then we can feed in our screw. Yeah, I had my finger here holding it in, I felt it pull that hex standoff down to the plastic, which is great. So now this is just bolted on. It's on. We'll work our way backwards now. The handle is going to fit in this slot here, and the handle isn't actually secured to the bar. It's secured by being between several parts. But I'm actually going to wait on that for just a moment since it might fall out as we continue. I'm going to take our ram base and ram core assembly, have this ready, and I'm going to take our pump assembly and set it out here towards the front. These little pointy parts ride in the U channel, if you can see that. And as you can see, there are slots inside this receiver, and if I feed it, the priming bars will fit right through those slots very nicely. Hope you can see that. And this moves back and forth easily. I'm going to take one of my big O-rings and put it over the ram base. And then my shock pad, I recommend to get the adhesive ready, you kind of fold it like that and it causes the white to crease up. And then you can just pull up on the white and it leaves the adhesive on. Sometimes the adhesive will peel off if you're not careful. If that does happen, don't worry, you can always glue it. Line that up, stick that on. Very good. For those wondering, this is an aluminum ram base with a Vanguard and notched core. It's also known as the dog bone. Don't want to forget my little O-ring that's going to fit over the top here. You can have one or even two here. I don't know how much of an exact science it is, but in my experience, one has always been fine, but sometimes it's fun to put on two. Just going to put on a little bit of lubricant. This is the lubricant that we use, by the way. In your kit, there should be some lubricant in your plunger tube that you can dip your finger in, just get a little tap on it, and then rub it around this O-ring. So, boom, we've got this. I'm going to slide this on, and you can see that those holes agree. Something I've been doing lately is I've been putting Loctite, just a drop, in these holes. This is not at all a requirement, but it's just a nice little touch, if you want. Got that. Everything should fit real nicely. And then I'm just going to take more of these small screws and fix the ram base to the priming bars. There we are. So this is going to be sliding back and forth, and it comes all the way forward there. And now this aluminum base actually sits against the aluminum P-cap plate, giving it that added strength. Right. Something I'm going to do, because I often forget, is take the front part of the receiver. Ours looks like this today because we're building a Talon Katana variant, or in other words, one that uses half-length darts. If you have an Elite one, your part is going to look like this. It's just the same thing, but much thinner. And what we're going to do is just feed this between the priming bars, and this will fit into the groove there. Now, where this goes will be determined later. It goes roughly there, but it's okay if it just slides around for now. We just want that there, so we don't forget it later. Now let's grab our plunger. Ours is aluminum, but there's plastic as well as 3D printed. But this is machined from a solid cylinder of aluminum, very sturdy, strong, good little weight to it. Pretty neat. I'm going to prep this plunger and put it into the plunger tube. Just going to give it some lube around the O-ring there, and then some extra lube in the plunger tube. Now, it's not an exact science again, but I like my total amount of lubricant in a plunger tube to be equal to that of like a small grape, basically, if you can imagine that. But once again, it's okay if it varies a little bit. Just spreading this lubricant around, looking good. This plunger tube is just going to fit right over the back of our ram base here. Going to slide it over this O-ring, making sure I'm not pinching the O-ring. Give it a 360 look around to make sure the O-ring didn't fold awkwardly. And this plunger tube is going to fit all the way into this section of plastic here. It actually fits all the way in there. Very nice. Now we'll go ahead and set our handle in place. We're going to verify that our pin is still there. Ours is still there, fortunately. Good, good, good. Very nice. Now, we can take this guy and orient it like so, or yeah, like this, and make some room here. It's starting to become a big blaster. Slide it into the groove and then slide it forward, letting the plunger tube slide inside of it. Looking good, and this has securing points to the bar. So what we're going to do is we're going to carefully flip it over and feed in a screw right there. With this secure, and be careful with the screw on the other side, make sure it lines up just right. If it doesn't line up just right, it can be a little bit tricky. Make sure you're not cross-threading your bolt or anything. Now we've got our clear PVC plunger tube, our stock tube, rear stock tube, and our spring. This is a Pro 25 spring. It's a medium strength spring. And it's got these coils on the end that are nice and flat and leveled out. That's the Pro 25 versus the normal K25, where the ends look like this. This isn't a huge issue, but if you like your spring to have those flat edges, then a Pro 25 or Pro 26 is definitely going to be your thing. We'll talk more about that later. Slide this on, get that all together, and you can guess what comes next. It's the butt of the blaster. Now this can be a little tricky because the blaster is going to want to expand and we need to close it. So I recommend having a couple screws ready. We're going to feed the spring around that shaft there in this butt pad assembly, and then slide it all the way on. And yeah, you see that? It wants to push back. So you're going to kind of hold it on as I shake everything, and then get that flipped over. And then these two screws are going to feed into the back here. So with the two screws back here placed correctly and tightened, one screw here, two screws here, then that entire rear side in the back is secure. Now, we'll take our other bar and we'll start installing this one. So make sure these two holes are in the back, and we're just going to let that slide right into place. And we should see everything line up very nicely. And I'm just going to go down the line here and install all of these screws. However, one thing I am going to do is I'm going to install a hex standoff in this back portion here that I've mentioned a couple times already. So let's do those. Okay, so now we've got the rear left half, like totally secure. So everything from here back is just solid as can be. I'm going to slide this out of the way. Something I'm going to do while I'm here is I'm going to make sure that the blaster will prime. Very good. It wasn't a very obvious click, but the sear did engage with the plunger, and the plunger's fully back. And now if we pull the trigger, it releases it. Good, good, good. All right, so let's work on the front half a little bit. Something I like to do before it's too late is I like to install the clamping screw in the front on this front half of the receiver. Now, this is going to be tough to show, but in here is a small hexagonal slot for you to put one of these nuts, one of the large ones. it's going to look a lot like this one here. There we go. And what it's going to do is it's going to later clamp into the barrel with a screw from underneath. So get our nut in there. Whoops. Make sure it's flat. Kind of tricky. I probably should have done this in retrospect before I put this in the blaster. Okay, so due to my mistake, that was a little bit of a headache. If you do have trouble with it, you can always just pop these off, slide this out, and do it externally. So that's my bad for misleading you a little bit chronologically, but I was able to get mine in there and get it secure. I don't think I'm going to be able to get the light to shine, barely. But yeah, I fed one of these stubby screws through the bottom and was able to set the nut on and then pull it down by tightening the screw. The real issue, though, was that mine was tight, and the screw actually, you couldn't really just push it in with your finger into place. So yeah, that was a bit of a hiccup, but we're on our way. Since it's fresh in our minds, let's do the same thing with this front muzzle here. This one, we just chuck the nut into place, and then feed a screw in through the bottom. Now, both of these instances, I'm not tightening this nut very much. I'm just basically putting it in place. I'm not actually tightening it down because we still need to put the barrel in, and that comes in a minute. Okay, let's install these side plates to the magwell. These fit like so and actually join this piece that's been floating for the last bit to back here. And we're going to use these bolts to feed across, and then there are little hex cutouts, as you can see, in these side plates. Doesn't matter which side you do. You can pick which one you want to be on which side. But yeah, it's going to fit like that, and we're going to feed a bolt through this one, through the entire blaster, into these to secure it all together. So we'll do those. All right, those are in there, so the magwell is almost done. Now we've got these holes here, and these are for the little screws. So we're going to gently, these strip pretty easy, we're going to gently put 1, 2, 3, and 4 into the magwell to secure it all. All right, so we're making good progress. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to loosen this bolt up here to make room for us to install the plunger tube cover. The plunger tube cover is an upgrade, optional. It just helps with cosmetics, and it's a place where you could mount a sight or something. It adds some more rail. But I believe the intended design is for it to fit like so, and then this bolt screws into it and kind of secures it. However, if that's how you can do it. You can just slap it on, and it'll sit there, and you can tighten that back down. I believe that's how it was intended. However, I find that it's a little bit, it kind of rotates. So this is just my personal preference, but I actually like to do it like this. But before I do that, what I do to kind of help it become more secure is I take another nut here. I like to put this nut in here. Let's help it a little bit. So that way the bolt has something very specific to actually screw into, and it kind of just helps it to be a little bit more sturdy. Now remember, this is just my preference. By all means, do it the way you see is best. So good. It's threading into the other one. Very nice. And then I'll just tighten this down. All right, so let's install the barrel and muzzle here. I've got a special barrel. This is a .509 barrel, meaning 0.509 inches inner diameter. It's just a little bit tighter than a default barrel for a better fit around the dart. And because it's a little bit tighter, we want the ram core to fit into the barrel. So we actually have wider barrel here and then a coupler to join it into the thinner barrel. So I'm just going to go take a mallet and tap this on gently to make sure it's nice and settled, and then we'll put it into the blaster. Now, I think I've run into a hiccup. Now that I have this on, I'm not going to be able to just slide it straight back because this doesn't fit through. So I'm actually going to quickly just remove these 4 bolts so that I can fit the barrel in. If you have a default barrel, you don't have to worry about that. But if you do have this coupler, you're going to probably need to do it. And sorry for misleading you again. So we've got our barrel fed into the receiver here. I'm going to take a screwdriver and tighten down that bolt we put in a while ago, the one that I struggled with. We're not going to tighten it too much, just nice and hand tight, so that way the barrel is secure. Now let's slide this guy back on. Remember, if you have a default barrel, you're not going to need to do this. Now I'm just still going to make sure that everything's working okay. Bring it all the way back. It primes. And I can slide it all the way forward. And this slides into the barrel properly. I can actually feel the O-ring engage with the tip of the end of the barrel there. And then deprime it. Good. Let's put on the muzzle. Make sure that our screw and nut are still there. Just slide this over the front. And then slide it into the U-channel. Very good. I'm actually going to prime it to get the foregrip out of the way. And then I'm going to put in our 2 hex standoffs in those slots, just like we've been doing this whole time. These ones, though, are easy because I can hold my finger behind it and then put the screw in on top. So I'm going to do that on either side. And then now with that all secure, I'm going to tighten down this bolt. That is going to help us secure the barrel. Not ridiculously tight, just enough to hold the barrel in, you know. Very nice. Okay, so technically it's functional right now, but we have a couple more upgrades to throw on. Another quick note, we've got a hole right here. Don't worry about that hole. That hole doesn't really serve anything in the U Caliburn. It's just so that way when we make a U Talon claw, you can just cut off the front and then build the U Talon claw. All right, let's install the railgasm. We've got a number of segments here. As you may notice, the segments have these little cutouts. And that's so that way one can fit into the other and help it be a little bit more secure. However, a quick thing that I noticed about my Caliburn in particular is that on the receiving end, it doesn't have a cutout. So that means on my last piece here, which has this special cutout for that tan piece of PVC to make room for it, I'm going to need to just file off this tooth real quick. So let me do that. Okay. So what's going to happen is they're just going to feed into one another. I like to put this blank one up front. And you notice that there's even a tooth on the muzzle here. And sorry if things drift out of frame, guys. I'm kind of a klutz. We're going to take this threaded rod. And we'll take an acorn nut. And I'm just going to cap this end of the threaded rod with this acorn nut. And then we're going to try and line up these pieces and get them ready. So I'll start with these 3 and then feed our threaded rod through the hole in the orange muzzle in the front. Now I'm going to back that out and try and fit this guy in. It's a little tricky because you kind of got to, like, if this is the top down, you got to start them at an angle and then push them into place. That's basically what's happening here. But since we don't have that notch, it actually makes it a little bit easier for us. Very nice. So I've got a little bit of threaded rod sticking out here. I'm actually going to loosen my acorn nut a little so I have a little bit more to work with. Good. Then going to put in a nut there and get that all tightened down. Very nice. Unfortunately, it looks like things aren't lining up just right here. There must have been some error in the part of railgasm that we printed. That's all right, though. I think what I'll do for now is I'll pop it off. But in principle, I've shown you how to do it. Just obviously, yours is going to fit better. I think it's this guy. This guy's the culprit, maybe. But yeah, I'm going to pop this off. Yours should be nice and snug, so don't worry about me. We'll move on. Well, there it is, guys. All done. The U Caliburn from start to finish. Something I did do is we had an upgrade. We have an upgrade for the rubber grip sleeve. Just a nice little touch. I threw that on real quick. Let's shoot it. Very nice. Let's get our chronograph ready. Let's see how hard it's hitting. So 205 there, not bad. $223. $221. Another 221. All right. Pretty good, pretty good. So, I'd say it turned out pretty nice. All right, folks, let's talk about upgrades. We've finished the blaster, and I'm just gonna, to the best of my memory, I might backtrack a little bit, but I'm gonna work my way from front to back, talking about every upgrade that we offer, and including my own 2 cents when it comes to recommendations. So, firstly, at the very tip, you can get I haven't mentioned these before, but you can get a scar barrel attachment. This fits over the end of the barrel and then tightens down onto it with 3 screws. And what this does is 2 things. It helps with adding pseudo rifling to the end of your barrel. So what happens is about 6 feet of fish line feed back and forth inside of this scar barrel. And what you can do is you can unscrew it. The entire thing is threaded. But you unscrew it ever so slightly and lock it back down. And what that does is it actually adds a twist to each of those individual fishing lines. And it provides, like I said, some rifling. So these can help greatly with accuracy with the slight decrease in power. The other thing this thing does is when you fire a blaster, the air comes from the plunger tube through the ram core, through the barrel, behind the dart, and then propels it out the front, right? However, sometimes if you have a powerful enough blaster, there's an extra puff of air at the end, so it'll actually hit the tail of the dart and send it kind of more fishtailing because of that extra puff at the end. What this also does beyond the rifling is it actually helps dissipate that puff. So yeah, there's the scar barrel. I personally don't have a lot of experience with scar barrels. I don't usually use them, but they can really help with accuracy. Other things here. We have this is a 14-inch 0.509 barrel. Once again, that means the inner diameter. Our default barrel is 0.527 inches. So you do the math, the difference between 0.509 and 0.527 is that it's a little bit tighter. The darts fit a little bit more snug in the barrel. So that's a Gen 2 worker. We have a Gen 3 worker. You know, it's a little bit more snug, which can help with performance. If you're looking for something even tighter, we have the 0.495 barrel, which is even tighter. I don't know the exact sciences of it, but if you find the right balance between plunger tube, or rather, if you find the right balance between spring, barrel length, and barrel tightness, you can get a lot of boosted performance out of the blaster. Our barrel lengths vary from between 12 to 18, and you can even get a 24-inch barrel. Not that I recommend it personally, and you can get them in any of those sizes. We currently do not offer brass barrels for the U channel series, but it has been done before, and it's something that may come in the future. So keep an eye out for that if you're really bent on having a brass barrel. My personal take on it, though, is that you don't need a brass barrel to have the same performance that a brass barrel offers. Of course, I'm no exact scientist on all of this. That's just kind of my experience. I could be proven wrong easily. Continuing our way back, that's barrels. As you saw, there was a railgasm. However, there was an issue. It didn't fit properly, so I've just got to reprint something. So I left it off for now. But the railgasm essentially just connects this rail here. On the standard Caliburn, that actually adds a lot of stability, and I highly recommend it. But on the U Caliburn, it's not really a necessity. You can totally go without it because the thing, this is me twisting it with both hands as hard as I can. Yeah, it's so sturdy. You don't really need it, but if you want that rail space for mounts or sights, things like that, totally cool, but mostly cosmetic reasons. Foregrips, this is the standard angled foregrip. We have a Pyrangle foregrip, which is more of like a bigger flat one to grab. There are pictures on the site, as well as a modular foregrip. Just be aware that the longer and more vertical your foregrip is, the more of a perpendicular force you're applying to the pump action. And as a result, more friction will be applied to the U-channel, which isn't a problem. Just be aware it might be a little bit stiffer of a pole. You can work with like lubricating it and such, but really it's not a deal breaker at all. Like choose whatever foregrip you want, just a heads up. I personally really like the angled foregrip. As long as you grip it right, grip it nice and low, your hand won't be rubbing against the U-channel. As we work our way back, this barrel coupler is necessary if you are going to get a tighter barrel. So that's just kind of part of it. We get to the magwell, and this is actually the first Talon Katana version magwell that I've built. Normally, like I said earlier, your magwell will actually be about this big, so you can fit elite darts. But this one is currently equipped to fit both standard Talon magazines as well as Katana magazines. So it's got those dual mag releases. This is great, but I personally just use an adapter and an elite magwell. That's what I would do, but totally up to you. If you use just these magazines, it's kind of nice. Next, we've got the aluminum P-cap plate. It's simply cut from a sheet of aluminum and feeds, up and down through the blaster. It helps strengthen this part of the assembly. There's a lot of force that comes from the spring and slams into the front here. So technically, if this was printed, it could handle a lot. But if you're going to do anything, if you're going to go pretty hard with a K26, and I'll talk about springs later, but if you're going to go for pretty beefy springs, especially a K14, highly recommend this. Moving on, we've got a notched Vanguard or Dogbone core in an aluminum ram base. These cores are machined as well as these ram bases, and then they're pressed together on a really strong press, and even with a little bit of glue to make sure that they're airtight from front to back. We have an aluminum plunger as well in this guy. Those aluminum parts are there just because they're really durable, and because they're precision machined, they can have very good air seals. In fact, this one to show you, bring it forward, just a very slight leak, but more commonly you can honestly have a perfect air seal. Probably just need to add a little bit more lube on that front O-ring. But you can also get acetal ram bases or plungers. This is a black acetal plunger. Same thing, same size, same measurements, except it's just made of plastic. It's a very durable plastic, or you can get them 3D printed. The differences in actual performance aren't too much from what I understand. It's just it's kind of a question of durability and also cool factor. It's really nice seeing these aluminum parts in there. Coming down here, we have an aluminum trigger. Not entirely necessary, but really cool. It's got a good feel to it, as well as an aluminum sear. Once again, very cool. Adds that extra kind of durability, but not entirely necessary as well. Working our way down, we've got our rubber grip sleeve, which is just kind of nice, makes that grip a little bit more comfortable. I don't know if it's my thing, but it's something extra you can throw on. This does underneath have a grip insert. I recommend the grip insert personally, just another cosmetic and preference thing. We've got our plunger tube cover, looks cool. I installed mine in a particular way that I prefer, just to kind of help with its sturdiness. It can be installed either way. If you even have a little bit of threaded rod, you can make it really secure, totally up to you. Just an extra place to put sights and things. Working our way further back, we've got our stock tube. The default is just this kind of clear bluish PVC pipe. We have different colors, check them out. And then coming all the way to the back here, talking about the spring, this is a Pro 25 spring. The Pro 25 springs just have nice square edges at the back instead of these curvy ones. This is a K25 for a good medium power. But we also have the K31, which is good for, younger people. If I would say approaching 8, 9, 10 years old is when you can probably expect to handle a K31 pretty comfortably. So if you're looking to give this to a kid, I recommend the K31. Anything over that, though, you can look into the K25. K26 is a solid spring, a little bit stronger, but a little bit beefier on the pull. You can combine a K25 and a K31 for, in my opinion, a K25 plus a K31 is as strong as you want to go before a K14, because you can actually still prime it. A K14 is kind of ridiculous. You got to squat and get weird angles on it in order to prime it and stuff. K14 is a really overkill in my opinion, but if you really want a blaster that'll shoot through 2 layers of cardboard, then you should consider putting in a K14, and that does happen if you get it just right. Additionally, you can get iron sights. I'd leave iron sights off as we ship them, but just real easy things to slap on. But yeah, I've kind of gone everywhere. But in general, if you're looking for a versatile springer that's just kind of medium power, this is about what you want. I would maybe go with the Elite Magwell, so that way you can switch between different dart types, and I'd maybe keep on a default barrel. However, if you're looking for high power, consider the 509 or 495 barrel, probably 18 inches in length, and consider if you feel comfortable with a really strong prime, do the K14. If you want something that's beefy, do the K25, K31. That'll be really good performance. And if you want something that's more manageable and normal, K26, in my opinion, is a good middle of the road when you still want power. That's a big info dump. I hope that was decently organized, but that's kind of my take on the U Caliburn. Oh, and one last thing is the powder coated bars. I actually really recommend it over the, what we've been doing in the past is these carbon fiber wrap. They're basically stickers. And don't get me wrong, that looks really cool. It's just this carbon fiber wrap is kind of delicate, and if you dink it, it can start peeling. So, if you're gonna really treat your blaster nice, go for the carbon fiber wrap. But I recommend the powder coat, which we're working on getting out there. We're just working out the kinks of it, and then hopefully it'll be on the website soon. But we'll have a few colors off the bat. It's possible that we'll even have priming bars, triggers, sears, plungers, everything metal here might start being powder coated, but we'll probably start with just a few things. We'll start with these big bars. But yeah, I think that's what I wanted to mention about it. The U Caliburn is a really great blaster, really sturdy. If you're worried about, dropping your Caliburn, your standard Caliburn, or flexing issues and things like that, which aren't usually issues, but if you're worried about things like that and you just want something really sturdy, definitely get a U Caliburn. U Caliburn is such a tried and true design by a great designer. This thing came together very easily, and that just goes to show how much thought was put into it. So I think that's it, guys. Really recommend it. Have fun. Enjoy such a sturdy platform, reliable platform. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.